to order and ask for the adoption of the agenda as presented, please. Councillor Thames.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to adoption of minutes. No minutes to deal with business arising. Item 5 bylaws. Item 5.1 proposed temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw 22-2020. Ms. Phillips.
Council requested a special meeting to discuss the potential for a face covering bylaw. Administration has provided 2 options, both of which mirror bylaws, which will be presented to the MD Council tomorrow morning at a special meeting at 9 a.m. One version is a mandatory requirement for face masks with fines for violations, and the second is a non-enforceable, non-mandatory, more of an educational information piece. Chief Abella is present to respond to any enforcement questions you may have, and I'll hand it back to Council.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Phillips. The second version of the bylaw, which is the non-mandatory bylaw, can you tell us any other municipalities that might have enacted that particular bylaw in the province?
I'm not aware of any that have this type of bylaw in place. That's not to say there isn't any, but I'm not aware of any.
Mr. Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask any fellow councillors if they've heard of any bylaws such as this in the province of Alberta.
I think for myself, I believe I don't know that there's the exact wording of the bylaw, but I believe there is confirmation where the big centers, Lethbridge included, were not enforcing the bylaw, and maybe Chief Abella can advise us on that accordingly, but I believe that's fact, is it not? We're aware of. Chief Abella, are you aware of that by chance?
Mr. Mayor, I know that there are some challenges with enforcement, but I can't say that no one isn't enforcing the bylaw.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Councillor Thames.
In regards to your question, Councillor Beckering, I have not heard of anybody that has a bylaw that is not a mandatory, that is suggested bylaw that without enforcement. I haven't heard of anybody that has that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Thames. From my perspective, it seems that if you're going to have a bylaw, it should be an enforceable bylaw, even though it might not be readily available to be enforced. And I'm glad that Chief of Police is here. There's a very powerful tool policing has in its arsenal. It's called discretion. And I wonder if, Mr. Mayor, if you could call upon the Chief to comment on that, please.
All right, thank you, Chief Abella.
Mayor,
just use the microphone so everybody can hear you at home.
Councillor Beckering is correct. Discretion is one of the oldest common law principles that exists to the office of police officer or constable in our system. Any bylaw that's put in place will require officers to attend to and make discretionary calls as to how and when a bylaw would be enforced. There are challenges associated with all legislation as it relates to enforcement. This one as well. We've seen it in other municipalities. If council makes the decision to move forward either way, the Taber Police Service will support whichever decision you make. We hope public citizens the public will voluntarily comply with the intent of the bylaws, either one, and that enforcement or police involvement is not necessarily required. And the police reserve the right not to use the provisions of this bylaw, but to use other pieces of provincial legislation, including trespass law and the orders of the Chief Officer of Medical Health, where applicable, to be more appropriate than perhaps certain municipal bylaws, depending on the context.
All right, thank you. Just a question related to the trespassing component. Have any local businesses taken you up on that particular plan of action? by chance?
We have had calls from businesses in relation to policies that they have about masking and people not masking, and we've attended and dealt with those appropriately. Those calls also go to the public health department for their own investigation and follow-up, and we have not been asked by public health to this day to lay any charges on public health's behalf or any business's behalf as it relates to COVID.
Related to the trespassing option, if they're not following their store policy?
That as well.
Right, okay.
Or a COVID response, the Public Health Act.
All right, perfect, thank you. Other questions arising? All right, Councillor Tams?
I don't really have a question, but in front of us is two different things. One's a mandatory, and one's a suggestion. Let's put it that way. And I think if we're going to go through with this as a masking bylaw, I think we need to go with the mandatory approach. COVID is real, whether we like to admit it or not. And wearing a mask, and I have my mask here, I wore it in, and I don't have it on now, and I will put it on when I leave again. But I think for respect of everybody else, and as leaders of a community, this is real. And I'm glad that this same discussion is going on with the MD, so we're building a whole regional thing on this. But I think we are at the point within our community, we're very close to being in the red zone with the number of cases we have here. And I think the only thing we can do is to make a mandatory mask bylaw, and hopefully we can help spread, fix the curve. I guess that's the word they use, is the curve. And it's just doing our part. And I think it's just respect for other people. And I would prefer to see a mandatory bylaw myself.
Councillor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Tams' statement. I happen to believe that the enforcement piece, of course, is somewhat critical in a sense, but somehow maybe I believe it isn't. But I do believe, Mr. Mayor, that our Ontario Police Service is a kinder and gentler police service, and they'll do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Garner?
I would echo what Councillor Beckering said. I think we've got very talented police officers who have lots of discretion, and I think they'll do the utmost to make things happen properly.
All right, thank you. Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have concerns with the mandatory bylaw, with the enforceability of it. However, I think the stronger wording of a mandatory bylaw is necessary. We've been encouraging all along for people to wear masks, and some people have been complying and some have not. And I feel that without the enforcement piece, it's not strong enough. And I agree with all my fellow councillors is that I believe in our police service and that they will use their discretion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think ultimately we're really just looking for the maximum compliance possible. Is I think the end-all goal here, following all the AHS rules and recommendations and restrictions. And I think this just ties into it. And as Councillor Firth indicated, also doing the right thing ultimately for the safety and benefit of our community residents and area residents as well. All right, any other questions arising? Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that Council gives first reading to temporary mandatory face covering bylaw 2020-2020, 22-2020, V1.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Someone prepared to make the second motion. Councillor Tams.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that Council gives second reading to temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw 22-2020 version 1.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council unanimously agrees to proceed to third reading of temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw 22-2020 version 1.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Mr. Mayor, I would make the motion that council gives third and final reading of temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw 22-2020 version 1.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. With that, just require someone to make a motion to close the meeting. Oh, sorry, there is no media present. Do we have any media questions you're aware of at this stage?
No, we do not.
Ms. Phillips. All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Councillor Towns. With that, someone prepared to close the meeting with a motion. Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move to close the meeting.
Motion on the table. All in favor?